We have never had an altcoin season during restrictive liquidity conditions, but guess what? This is about to end in just a few days, and we're going to take a look today at whether or not this means we're going to have an altcoin season or we're just going to continue seeing the markets go down. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and let's talk about your altcoin. First and foremost, if you are like me holding altcoins right now, it is absolutely not easy. I am with you guys because we are seeing the fear and greed index hit a new low for the year. We are now at 10, which is below the March dip as well as the April dip when we had the panic selling, the tariff news, and everything was happening. And, it was all bad in April. But now it's even worse with the extreme fear being hit over the last week and 2 weeks, where we are just not seeing sentiment bounce back, and the prices of Bitcoin as well as altcoins are absolutely not bouncing back. Now, it is not just crypto, and if we take a look at the stock market, it's been an absolute chaotic mess in the stock market. Looking at the VIX, which basically tracks the volatility in the S&P 500, the best or the top 500 companies in the States make up this index. And we can see that over the last month, since about October 10th, which is when we had, billions of dollars liquidated in crypto, the worst liquidation event ever in crypto. Since then, the VIX has been up about 26%. So the repercussions of what's happened in the last month have been felt in every single market. But the question is now, why is this happening? And are better liquidity conditions really going to turn this market around? To answer part one, why is this happening and why is crypto bleeding so bad? Well, taking a look at one narrative, which of course is just a narrative, but looking at what Tom Lee has said on CNBC, he basically attributes the last month and a half to the whole liquidation event that happened on October 10th. He's saying that some market makers, he doesn't say which ones, doesn't name drop who actually went under, but he's basically saying that the cascading events or the continued downside to crypto right now has been because some of the top market makers have gone under and are currently trying to play catch up to, of course, make up for all the losses that they have. So that's kind of the one thing that Tom Lee is saying and communicating. And as you guys all know, he's the chairman of Bitmine, and Bitmine holds the most amount of Ethereum. And in terms of their profits on Ethereum, they're down over $4 billion. And he's continuing to buy Ethereum. So what does he know that we don't know is left to be seen? But that is his narrative and why we are continuing to see the markets go down. Now, if we take a look at Bitcoin right now, at the time of me recording this video, it's not looking great because there is something very important happening today. As you're watching it, we are going to get the second weekly candle close, which is likely going to be, again, below the 50-week moving average, which is currently sitting around 102,800. We're at $84,000. So unless Bitcoin pumps, 20% in the next few hours, we are not going to see a close above the 50-week moving average. Now, the reason this is very important is because last time this happened in 2021, when we had, the local top in November, we can see that soon after we had, these two weekly candles where Bitcoin's price fell below the blue line, below the 50-week moving average, and then it continued all the way down to, let's say, $34,000. And that was basically the end of the bull market. But as I've said in my previous videos, there was a rebound of about 50% on Bitcoin's price to go retest that blue line, retest the 50-week moving average. It wasn't able to hold and continue upwards here, but it just, started that bear market and the rest is history. So if we go back to where we are right now, we are now entering that territory of having the second weekly candle close below the 50-week moving average. But as I mentioned, I do think there is eventually going to be a relief rally. And if we extrapolate to whenever that is, let's say the 50-week moving average continues like this, Bitcoin likely going to rebound at some point to go retest this as support or resistance. If it breaks above, comes back to test it as support and does something like this, that could be a possibility. Or it finds resistance on this and it comes straight back down, and that is our bear market continuation. So those are the two possible options right now, but we want to know about altcoins, because looking at altcoins right now, it's disgusting. I mean, let's take a look at Bubble's map, and you're going to see that it is just been an absolutely brutal time for altcoins. If we look at the last month, we have privacy coins doing quite well. But again, over the last, 24 to 48 hours, some of the privacy coins have gotten a hit as well. But taking a look at coins like Solana, down 33%. Taking a look at AVAX, down 30%. Say 30%. Bonk, Sui, all of these are down. And we are talking about 30 to 50% down in just a span of 30 days. And quite literally, 40 days ago, Bitcoin was at an all-time high of 126,000. So a lot can change, and a lot changes very fast in crypto. Now, what we've had over the last 24 hours or 48 hours has continued to add uncertainty in the markets. And that is because we've had two Fed people. So Jerome Powell is the chair of the Fed. The Fed is made out of other members. We had the president of the Fed, Williams, and someone else come out and basically say, you know what? If December's meeting, the FOMC meeting, which is happening in mid-December, if we need to cut, we will cut. That's basically what they said. And we saw the chances of a interest rate cut in December blow up like crazy after those comments. We now have the markets predicting a 70% chance of a 0.25 basis point cut. And just over, a few days ago, it was the opposite, where people and analysts were thinking that we were not going to see a cut in the December meeting. So we have what? Volatility, fear, and a lot of uncertainty, which continues to be a massive issue with the markets right now. So if we take a look at Polymarket, the amount of money that's been bet on this decision in December by the Fed, we are currently seeing the odds go like crazy. It is basically just a circus at this point, but a rate cut brings better liquidity conditions, and something else that's happening in just a few days' time is the end of quantitative tightening, which is set to take place on December 1st. Now, with that being said, I want to bring you guys to altcoins, because we want to look at what's happening with altcoins. And if we take a look at the others chart, this is all altcoins outside of the top 10, because we're not going to be looking at the top 10 per se in this video, because we're likely all holding degenerate coins, smaller cap coins, and everyone that's waiting for the altcoin season is likely looking at this others chart to get a sense of what their coins are doing. So we are sitting around $200 billion, but I don't want you guys to pay attention to the amount that we are at. I want you guys to look at something very interesting, because if we look at the balance sheet of the Fed, this is basically what's going to end on December 1st. Quantitative tightening, or this green line going down, which is the Fed selling treasury assets. This is going to end, and the Fed is going to start quantitative easing slowly but surely, stealthy. They're not going to go out and just buy everything in the markets, but there's going to be a period of time where the balance sheet is no longer going to be reduced, and soon after, it's likely going to go up because of liquidity crises that we are currently seeing. So if we back up to, let's say, 2017, remember the 2017 altcoin season? Probably not, because, a lot of us were probably not in crypto back then. But I want you guys to realize one thing. This green line here, when it's flat, it means that the Fed isn't really doing much to their balance sheet. They're not really doing quantitative easing. They're not really doing quantitative tightening. But we had a peak, let's say, in the beginning of January 2018, and the Fed wasn't doing anything. So liquidity conditions were relatively good here because the economy was doing well. And if we take a look at another graph that shows us these different, bubbles of liquidity, taking a look at this, the money to supply over 21 central banks. So this is not just in the States, but if we go back to 2018, well, what do we see? We see this green area. The money to supply growth year over year was at a peak in the early stages of 2018, which is also when Bitcoin and altcoins made new all-time highs. So keep that in mind. Now, if we go back to our chart here and we take a look at what happened soon after this, period where alt made new all-time highs, Bitcoin made a new all-time high, well, restrictive liquidity conditions came in. So this green line starts to go down, and it goes down all the way until September of 2019. So basically a year and a half of liquidity tightening conditions where the Fed continues to reduce its balance sheet, reducing the liquidity in the markets. And then there is a period of time in September where it stops and the Fed starts slowly but surely quantitative easing and then goes absolutely massive with quantitative easing, which brings us to the 2021 bull market and the 2021 highs in November for both Bitcoin and altcoins. Again, we're in a quantitative easing cycle at that time. And then what do you see is by, let's say, April, May of 2022, there is another shift in the Fed. They decide to start quantitative tightening, they end quantitative easing, and as you can see, we are now into a bear market with quantitative tightening. Now, the same analysis can be applied with interest rates, and if we take a quick look at this, so if I remove the Fed balance sheet and I put the Fed interest rates, so this is, the US interest rates as we see them, we can see that we had a bull market when the interest rates were at 1.5%. And then by the end of, 2019 or 2018, we had interest rates around 2.5%. So a full point higher, and we were definitely into a bear market. Then if we fast forward to 2020 and 2021 bull market, we see practically no interest rates because of the global pandemic, and we see quantitative easing going crazy, which of course permits the bull market to happen. And then what we have soon after is interest rates going from practically nothing to some of the highest rates it's been at since a very long time, all the way to 5.5%. And even though we have seen, the Fed start cutting rates slowly but surely since 2024, they are still in a very higher range than what we've seen in previous years. And we haven't seen altcoins rebound quite well or have a sustained altcoin season, likely because liquidity conditions are simply not present. Now, again, if I bring you back to this chart here, you're going to see that in 2021, that green area is yet again peaking. You have massive liquidity conditions, a lot of price action for Bitcoin and altcoins. But what we're seeing right now in 2025 is very little liquidity conditions compared to the last two cycles. But Bitcoin has still made a new all-time high, but altcoins haven't. And that is the most interesting thing, in my opinion, because Bitcoin has made new all-time highs. You would think that altcoins follow suit, but in fact, that has not been the case. And going back to liquidity conditions regarding the quantitative easing or tightening, well, we can see that altcoins actually bottomed out when we had liquidity conditions stop, when we had the Fed stop quantitative tightening in September of 2019. You can kind of see that altcoins, the others chart, basically bottomed out at $10 billion. Yes, there was a COVID-19 pandemic crash, but ever since then, we've seen, altcoins kind of just hover around 200 all the way to $320 billion, but we have not necessarily seen a bottom just yet. But as we know, quantitative tightening is ending in just 9 days' time. So does that mean there's going to be a bottom for altcoins? Are they going to continue to bleed? Of course, nobody has a crystal ball and nobody can tell you for sure. But looking at liquidity conditions just alone, there could be a very good case to say that yes, liquidity conditions are going to be better, therefore altcoins are going to be better. But I want to put a caveat to that because I do think it matters what Bitcoin decides to do. If Bitcoin continues to go down, well, unfortunately, I don't think altcoins are going to have as much liquidity as previous cycles, even though global liquidity is going to be better. If Bitcoin decides to go higher, then perhaps we get a rally, a more sustained one on altcoins. Now, the other thing that could potentially happen, because a lot of people are saying the 4-year cycle is done, it's all about liquidity, which I tend to agree with, although I'm still very cognizant that Bitcoin did reach a new all-time high of 126,000 in Q4 of this year. I'm not trying to push the goalpost either, but if we take a look at a scenario that could potentially happen, let's say we have that 50-week moving average. Hopefully Bitcoin bottoms out around, $70,000 to $80,000, kind of consolidates here, then goes back, finds that 50-week moving average, breaks above it, turns it back into support as global liquidity conditions become better in 2026, and starts pushing upwards yet again in 2026. Also bringing altcoins with it. Now, that is something we have not seen in previous cycles, and I'm well aware of it, but we've also not seen liquidity conditions be restrictive for as long, and we haven't seen good liquidity conditions come into the cycle just yet. So that's my tinfoil for you guys today. Like I said, you have to continue paying attention to the markets. There's a lot of uncertainty. There is a lot of, misinformation out there. The best thing to do is to trade the market that you have right in front of you. It's tough to do. Sometimes it's even better to do nothing. And having cash on the side is not a bad thing. So if you want to see what I'm doing in the crypto space at this point, have a look at the description below. First link in there is our private Discord. With that being said, if you did enjoy the video, make sure you smash the like button. It truly helps out the channel. I'm trying my best to give you guys some good information here. Feel free to comment down below what your thoughts are on the rest of 2025 and 2026. And with that said, I'll catch you guys in my next video. Peace.